Let me start by welcoming you all to Addis Ababa, the capital city of this nation, but also the seat of our continental organization, the African Union. I thank the African Union and UNESCO for organizing this forum and all those who have worked tirelessly to make it happen. The aim of this forum could not be more timely. The United Nations Summit of the Future just took place last week in New York on the margins of the General Assembly. It gathered world leaders to forge a new international consensus to safeguard the future for all humanity and for future generations. They adopted the Pact for the Future, aiming to catalyze sustainable development, peace and security, science and technological innovation, global governance, and solidarity with future generations. Education is part of it. In my view, there are two keys to achieving any aspects of the Pact for the Future. There are two. One is knowledge, our greatest renewable resource for transformation and progress. The other is our continent, Africa. And this forum brings us together. I say that Africa is key, not only in how these topics will play out on the continent, but in how what happens in Africa will shape the world. African countries have indeed their own challenges. We have our own challenges, such as poverty, conflicts, etc. But conflict which comes with high costs, not only in terms of loss of human lives, but also so much needed resources. But Africa possesses also immense opportunities to a better future, and mainly by transforming our education systems. We have diverse experiences, contexts, and histories, but we have a shared destiny. When I served as chair of the International Commission on the Futures of Education, I was invited by UNESCO's Director General Audrey Azoulay to take a global view in steering the three-year process to reimagine the future of education. We looked into the many contexts around the world, and we could see so many distinct present realities and future possibilities. How could education respond to all this? Some students worried about their role in contributing to the causes of climate change. Some were already living its devastating impacts through floods and fires. Some countries saw populations dramatically aging over the next 30 years, while some saw the growth of school-aged populations outpacing numbers of teachers and schools. And at least 258 million young people around the world still had no access to schools without a clear path to getting them there. That is why our flagship report uses the plural, futures, in its title, Reimagining the Futures Together, a social contract for education. Because there is not only one possible path that we are destined to follow, but countless possibilities. Some are promising and others disastrous. Now, when I look at our continent, Africa, I admit that I find myself optimistic. We have indeed abundant possibilities. Many are untapped. Knowledge is key to unlocking them, not for a few to profit, but for all to thrive. We are a youthful continent. By 2050, 1 of 3 people in the world will be African. We welcome continent-wide collaboration. The African Union's Vision 2063 captures high aspirations that can change the narrative of where we're heading. We have a wealth of talent and creativity. Our diverse perspectives and ways of thinking allow us to respond quickly to new circumstances, innovations, and ideas. We also face many challenges, but these challenges need to be overcome, not by small adjustments, technical packages, or prescriptions from elsewhere. Rather, we require a fundamental change of approach that harnesses knowledge indigenous to the continent and its many peoples in cooperation and meaningful solidarity with the world. But why do we need to transform knowledge for Africa's future? Many imagine that Africa has been on the receiving end of modern knowledge as its beneficiaries. This view downplays so much of the knowledge that humanity relies on today that originated, in fact, in Africa. Think of the unmatched achievements in many countries, and so many great, including mine, and so many great African empires, and of more contemporary African societies with sophisticated systems of social organization, resource distribution, cultivation, and infrastructure. It also ignores how knowledge has been used against Africa with long-lasting consequences. Let me mention just a few examples, although there are many. Colonial education systems taught a version of history that minimized or ignored African perspectives, emphasizing instead the supposed benefits of colonial rule and aiming to undermine African self-esteem and identity. Around the world, we still suffer with the legacy of this misinformed narrative today. African cultures and social systems systematically misrepresented African societies as primitive and requiring a so-called civilizing mission. This could not have occurred without disguising racism as scientific knowledge. Pseudo-scientific theories promote racial hierarchies widely used to legitimize slavery, colonization, and also racial segregation. Furthermore, knowledge has been weaponized to subjugate Africa's social, economic, education, and political systems. The education system established during colonial rule, for example, were designed to produce a small elite loyal to colonial powers. Local languages, culture, and histories were often neglected. Even after independence, many African countries retained educational curricula that reflected those perspectives, perpetuating the marginalization of African knowledge and identities. Knowledge in the form of maps, geological surveys, and agricultural research was used to identify and exploit Africa's natural resources, often harming local populations in the process through displacement, slavery, or environmental contamination. African medicinal knowledge and biodiversity have been appropriated by foreign entities and private companies through biopiracy, where indigenous knowledge is exploited for profit without fair compensation or recognition. We also have suffered for cognitive imperialism and knowledge as a tool of control in the form of political manipulation to serve others' interests. In the years after the Second World War, during the Cold War, for example, external powers used knowledge for tribal divisions and political landscapes to manipulate and control African nations for political gains. This at a very crucial moment in many African nations' achievement of sovereignty and national independence. And the use of media, literature, and academic work continues to perpetuate stereotypes about Africa as a continent of poverty, disease, and conflict to justify political and economic interventions from outside. In my opinion, I do not see any way in which we can imagine the future differently without directly addressing these legacies in our relationship with knowledge. This is why we must move away from a mere transfer of knowledge that dominates from one place to another. Instead, we need a transformation of knowledge that empowers, indeed, everyone. The good news is that this is already changing. History is now accounting for the misuse of knowledge to oppress rather to empower, with Africa as a case in point. Many of you are here because you recognize the problem with what I just described in the way that knowledge, science, and understanding has been so distorted with harmful effects. But in the words of the Afro-Caribbean physician and philosopher Frantz Fanon, what matters is not to know the world, but to change it, end of quote. So let me now share a few opportunities for change that I see when I imagine the future of this continent of ours to transform knowledge and the future. One is that I see great opportunities over the coming years for a fluorescence of knowledge production and research from within the continent. During and after the colonial period, much of the research on Africa has been conducted by non-Africans who have framed African issues through an external lens. The executive secretary of the ECA has just told us the low proportion of African researchers that we have. We can change this here and now, regardless of your sector, field, or location, by investing in African research capacity, institutions, epistemologies, and perspectives. You will help transform the over-dependence on externally generated knowledge to a greater reliance on knowledge indigenous to the continent. Ensuring that African scholars and institutions are equitably represented in global research initiatives and that their contributions are recognized can help decolonize global knowledge production. This includes equitable access to research funding, publication opportunities, and intellectual property rights. We can lead the way in creating more equitable and inclusive global knowledge networks that facilitate the sharing of knowledge across borders, cultures, and disciplines facing global challenges such as inequality and environmental sustainability. I also hope for a deepening of African ethics in leadership and governance, both across the continent and beyond. The wealth of African knowledge and philosophies, such as those rooted in Ubuntu, can inform more ethical and inclusive governance models that prioritize the well-being of all members of society. This can influence global governance practices, promoting policies that are more equitable and just. African approaches to conflict resolution, which often emphasize reconciliation, restorative justice, and community healing, can offer valuable insights into global peace-building efforts, contributing to more sustainable and just solutions to conflicts. But this goes beyond those within Africa. Other governments, development partners, researchers, international organizations, and the private sector must think deeply about their models and practices and reflect on both their intended and unintended consequences on the world. An ethical approach, eliminating hypocrisy in which certain powerful actors can act beyond the standards of international law, is the only way forward towards a stable and just future for Africa and indeed for the whole humanity. Finally, Africa has a long and tremendous source of inspiration for global solidarity movements that unlock the potential of everyone to transform knowledge and work for change. Given the challenges that face humanity and the planet, we will need everyone's voices now more than ever. The principles of Pan-Africanism have long advocated for unity, solidarity, and collective self-reliance among African nations. They challenge inequities in the global system and promote more just and equitable futures for the continent. Communal knowledge creation and sharing approaches can be applied to global challenges, fostering collaborative and participatory methods in research, education, and policymaking that prioritize community needs and perspectives. African art, music, literature, and other expressions of knowledge and culture can play a powerful role in challenging stereotypes, fostering mutual understanding, and building bridges between diverse cultures, contributing to a more inclusive and connected world. Let me also add that the principles of Pan-Africanism need really to be better known and revived, I would say. Pan-Africanism has to be better defined and embraced by the new generation, because sometimes I see it to be really misused. And of course, this brings us back to education. Incorporating African histories, philosophies, languages, knowledge systems into educational curricula can foster a more inclusive and accurate understanding of global history and knowledge. ADG Giannini, I'm happy you mentioned the huge contribution of UNESCO in these 11 volumes on African history. I think this is absolutely important, and I invite you all to read it. But we have to really go beyond. It has been done a few decades ago, in fact, and there is need for Africans to know properly their history. This can empower Africa's youth and young people around the world to see the value in diverse cultural perspectives and contribute to more inclusive and equitable global knowledge. As I said, the good news is that this change is already happening. History is now accounting for the misuse of knowledge and recognizing the need to reshape global knowledge systems to be more inclusive, just, and sustainable, benefiting not only the continent, but the entire world. Institutions, systems, and processes are sometimes slower than change, and this is where we need to focus some of our deliberations over the coming 3 days that you are here together. My hope and my expectation is that this forum of UNESCO chairs and partners will harness these positive changes and accelerate them into many fields of knowledge and discourses as they are intertwined. There is yet much to be done, in many cases before it's too late to change course or face irreversible damage to humanity and the planet. As I conclude, I'm thinking of a proverb that says, knowledge is a garden. If it's not cultivated, it cannot be harvested. But I also like to add what a great son of this continent, President Nelson Mandela, said, and I quote, "Education is the most powerful weapon which we can use to change the world." And education is a powerful way to liberate and empower women and girls. My presence and the one of my sisters here is a proof that education has brought us where we are today. This cannot be overemphasized. The world is today trapped in its past struggles with knowledge, and unless we enrich its soil, its water, and its seeds with the wisdom and understanding that allows us to imagine different futures, it will not yield anything different. Let Africa lead the way in this transformation to a richer harvest for all. I thank you very much for your kind attention.